I'm sorry. I thought I have to read some sheet music here.
Okay.
This is something new. I've never seen this piece of music before, but I've been looking at it, and it seriously looks like something that would be a big hit.
Okay.
Maybe not this minute, but pretty soon if it's properly handled. I was talking with my good friend Eddie, who is the greatest singer in the whole area, and possibly between the two of us we could make this thing work.
You're going to have him come over?
Well, we can't do that yet. He
Okay.
hasn't worked on it. He doesn't know how it goes yet.
I
We'll
didn't
find
know.
out.
I don't know what you got planned
This
here.
young
I'm
lady
just
over
going
here,
with the flow.
that young lady over there presented us with this music. Apparently, it's originally was 1948 with the copyright, and it was sent to Tin Pan Alley. That's a long time ago, folks.
Oh, Tin Pan Alley. Oh,
And this is the man that sang it, I believe, Ed Maynard and Tex Morgan and his band, but it was written by Chris McCann.
get out. Oh my gosh, that was your song? And we're going to be talking about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, here we go.
Okay. Just letting the show flow. What a beautiful piece that is. And for those
Thank
of
you.
you who did not catch it, we have Debbie Botch coming up in one of our later segments, and she's paying tribute to Chris McCann, who also was very instrumental in working with Schenectady Light Opera, and he wrote this song.
Nice.
Beautiful song.
That is
isn't it?
beautiful.
It really is. I like it.
It's a
Thank you.
tearjerker.
Yeah, it's lovely. Did it have words to it?
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, we got to work on that one, don't
Yeah,
we?
Eddie's,
Get some words. Did he
Eddie-
write the words too?
yes.
He wrote the lyrics?
Love for some lasts a lifetime,
Wow.
and for others just a day.
Wow.
How prolific is that?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you, Jim. That was really a lovely rendition, and I love that you played the song that Chris McCann wrote.
Isn't it wonderful?
That was such a surprise for me.
I just happened to bring the music with me, thinking, maybe I would show it, and
Yeah, and here
But
he was, and he played it. Yeah.
beautifully, beautifully.
Now, tell us, who is Chris McCann?
Wow, what an interesting question. I would call Chris, when it comes to community arts, a man for all seasons, and a Schenectady
Well, he
man
wrote
for all
music, that's for
seasons.
sure.
He wrote music. He wrote a couple of books. He was very active in an early period of Schenectady Light Opera. He wrote children's plays and produced them.
Did he really? Oh, my
Yes,
goodness.
yes. And so over a fairly long period of time, and today I think we'll focus a little bit on his SLOC days and his Mary Moppets days. Some
Okay.
people will remember the name Mary Moppets, which
remember
was
that,
a
yeah,
children's
yeah.
theaters group which Chris founded. and wrote 5 plays for. So maybe we'll kind of start with SLOC and move
let's
into that.
take a look, because you have some slides, so we'll talk about the slides as he brings them up.
Sure. Well, first, who is Chris McCann? There he is. Yes.
Ta-da!
Chris was actually born in 1929 in Springfield, Massachusetts, so he liked to think that he was really a Massachusetts guy. But he and his family moved back here 5 years later, and he spent the rest of his life in Schenectady and Southern Saratoga counties. So the truth is that Chris was a Schenectady guy.
Schenectadian, eventually.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
He graduated from Mount Pleasant High School in 1947, and this is when he first got involved in SLOC. He graduated, in those days they had a January graduating class, so he was done in January, but he was kind of waiting until June to get a job. So he got involved at Mount Pleasant High School, where the Schenectady Light Opera Company was producing and putting on some of its plays, as a member of the prop committee. So now this is 1947. Chris is 17 and a half years old. He's got the theater bug. He's already got the blood. It's in his blood, right? He's got the theater bug. So he was doing that job, and he earned his first $20 working for SLOC in that area. And then he took a couple of years off when he first got a job. And I think we'll back up a little bit, because I want to talk about some of those even before Paint Your Wagon. Here is a set of pictures of some of the really early playbills that SLOC had. And in those days, they were doing plays that were more or less operettas, Gilbert and Sullivan.
Well, they call it light opera, but now they do it all.
Yes, and Victor Herbert and all of those kind of things. And he was involved in a show, I can't remember, I think it was The Gondoliers. And at that time, Ed Stone, who was also the director of WRGB, live shows for GE, he was involved in that show, and Chris was on the lights, and they kept having a person on the stage that wasn't coming on at the right time, and so Ed Stone said, "We need somebody who can read music," and Chris raised his hand and said, "That's me," and they came down, and he became the cue master for about 7 shows as a young man after that.
So he kind of morphed into different positions.
Yes, absolutely. And so those early shows like the Chocolate Soldier and the Gondoliers and that type of thing eventually gave way to his later involvement in the Schenectady Light Opera. And that later involvement, he actually was invited back. He took a break, and he was invited back, and he joined the board of directors.
Oh, okay.
All right, so maybe we can look at another one of those slides. There we are. This is the time when they did Paint Your Wagon. Now SLOC is becoming an organization that's doing the modern musical, right, like Brigadoon or Carousel, and here's some shots of Chris in Paint Your Wagon. And at that time, he was on the board with some other notables. Of course, one name that comes to mind is Orlando Pigliavante.
He was on the show a few weeks ago.
Yes. So he was, and Mary B. was on, and Alan Foster, and many names that were involved with SLOC for many years. So that was a special time for him. And his last main activity with Schenectady Light Opera was being the producer. So that's why we have that picture, Chris, the producer of Paint Your Wagon. So he had moved up to that type of activity. But this is now, I think, about 1965, 1966, 67. And as SLOC was moving into the modern American musical, Chris got an invitation to get involved in children's theater. Some people might remember the Glenn Warden Players, which is a group that actually produced plays for children, primarily in those days up in the Glenville area. And so they were looking for a director for a show, and he was a little bit apprehensive about taking on that role, but he did. And while he was doing it, this was called the Pirate Ship. I think we have a slide here that we can look at. Yes, there's the Pirate Ship, and there's a couple of photographs of some of the
kids, isn't it?
Absolutely. And while he was doing that show, he thought about the fact that there were very few plays for children that were really just for entertainment purposes, because that's really what he loved to do, was entertain. And so he then, here we go, he then got the idea that, I can write a play. And he spent the summer after being the director of the pirate ship, writing The Mysterious Disappearance of Professor Sulfate. And
Sulfate, I love
it's
the
really
name.
a cute. Is that
Yeah.
the one I brought? I actually have a copy of the script with
Oh my gosh.
with everything,
notes.
notes on it. Who's going to stand
What a
where?
memory, what a memory.
Yes,
Oh,
it's a
God.
beautiful
Yeah.
memory. Absolutely. And so with Professor Sulfate, they produced it for Glen Warden's Players, but then Chris had an idea that there really should be a Capital District region-wide children's traveling theater. He got that idea in the 1940s as a young, maybe 11-year-old child, when he first saw a play by Claire Tree Major's traveling theater group from New York City. They brought
It really hit him.
It hit him, and he had it in the back of his mind for all those years, and it blossomed there in the late 1960s. So he wrote that play, The Mysterious Disappearance of Professor Sulfate. They produced that, and the new group, which got the name The Merry Moppets, gave that show to dozens of different schools around the area. And then he wrote several other plays, I think one called The Hopeless Heroes, and a little later one.
What is this now?
This is The Merry Moppets. An important connection for all of the fabulous amateur talent in this area was GE and General Electric. And so that last picture that we were looking at, it was in the GE Works newsletter of GE employees who were actually in the casts in these children's plays. So that's what we're looking at.
Of course, they had the GE Theater as well.
Yes.
Of the air,
Yes.
WGY.
Yes. Now, Barkaway takes it another step. Barkaway, I always have to remember the Barkaway's. Oh gosh. Anyway, Barkaway. It was a show that Chris called the pinnacle of his experience with the Merry Moppets. It was produced at a time when Schenectady had a big arts program, and they had some kind of a citywide activity, and it won an award for that. And the next thing you know, WMHT asked to produce it, and it actually was on WMHT Live. We don't have a copy of that video, and
that's
he
too bad.
wasn't able to get it at that time. So
Well, we're almost out of time. I hate to
Oh
say
my
that.
goodness,
I know there's so
Barkaway's
much-
secret treasure. Well, just a couple of quick thoughts. If you think at the end of his playwright period that he was done, oh no, he got involved in a antique collecting, and then later
We
in
should
his
have you come on
retired.
the show and talk a little bit more, maybe do a second segment on this.
Yes.